Hello and welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written by Dr. Adrian Peterson in Indianapolis and produced in the studios of WRMI Shortwave in Miami, Florida. I'm Jeff White. Today on Wavescan, another report from the National Association of Shortwave Broadcasters annual meeting, various items of shortwave news, and DX reports from the Philippines and Bangladesh. We begin this week's Wavescan with various items of DX news. You may remember on a previous program, we told you about some test transmissions from PCJ Radio in Taiwan via the Trincomalee Sri Lanka relay station on Sundays from 1300 to 1400 UTC on the frequency of 11750 kHz with 125 kilowatts beamed to South and Southeast Asia. One of our Wavescan listeners, Gautam Sharma, in Abhayapuri, Assam, India, tells us that he heard the PCJ radio transmission on 11750 kHz on May 19th with satisfactory reception. He monitored the broadcast for the first 17 minutes or so, first at 12:59 UTC with interval signal, station ID, and Andy Sennett announcing the time and the Focus Asia Pacific feature. Here's what it sounded like in India.
International. It's 13 hours UTC. I'm Andy Sennett. I'm coming up on this week's Focus Asia Pacific, rating the business model of people smuggling, questions over legal fairness.
And a few minutes later at 13:15 UTC, Gautam made the following recording of Keith Perron introducing his Happy Station show with a little bit better reception.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to your program, Happy Station Show from PCJ Radio International. As we heard in the introduction, my name is Keith Perron. Not to be confused with Tom Meyer, even though I have been told in the past that occasionally I could sound like him.
Well, thanks to Gautam Sharma in Abhayapuri, Assam, India for those recordings of PCJ Radio via Sri Lanka. Keith Perron tells us that they have since changed from 11750 to 11835 kHz due to co-channel interference from Radio Havana, Cuba. The new frequency is 11835 kHz, still on Sundays at 1300 to 1400 UTC. The tests were scheduled to end on June 9th, but they have been extended now as a result of some sponsorship from the Texan shortwave receiver manufacturing company in China. So you still have a chance to pick up PCJ Sundays at 1300 to 1400 on 11835 kHz. Another transmission from Taiwan is the clandestine station Jiwang Shisheng, or Sound of Hope. Dino Bloise here in South Florida heard a broadcast of Sound of Hope on May 27th at 13530 kHz at 1445 to 1500 UTC in the Cantonese language. Here's what it sounded like, signing off at 1500 UTC.
70万人的力气，郑州非转基因15全程零添加，知能好油选郑州，全国招商热线400-158-0952。进口里欢乐的人们和谐生活，进口里富饶的沃土，人杰地灵。这就是我的进口，百家天户好，万里山河美，秀丽华夏，壮美中国。
A recording of Sound of Hope from Taiwan on 13530 kHz at 1500 UTC, made by DXer Dino Bloise here in Miami. Dino is the producer of a popular Spanish-language DX program called Frecuencia al Día, which is broadcast on some of the same shortwave stations that broadcast Wavescan. Michael Polis of Evanston, Illinois, reminded us that June 1st marked the 30th anniversary of the first broadcast of Radio Earth, June 1st, 1983. Mike was a partner in the enterprise, along with myself and a number of others. Listeners may remember the names of well-known shortwave broadcasters such as Rudy Espinal and David Monson, who were also heard on Radio Earth. It began as a daily one-hour program on the shortwave transmitter of Radio Clarín in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic.
This is Radio Earth, worldwide commercial radio.
The following program is copyright 1989, Radio Earth International Incorporated. All rights reserved.
From our studios and correspondents around the globe, Radio Earth presents The World.
How well we remember hearing Suzanne Polis's voice emerging from the Heterodyne, writes Mike, then Rudy in Santo Domingo, and then Jeff and Matt Bell in Curacao. A breath of fresh air, as it was later described. Over the next few years, Radio Earth moved to WRNO in New Orleans, KCBI in Dallas, and WHRI in Indiana, and some programs were also broadcast from Radio Milano International in Italy. Shortwave listeners from the 1980s may remember that the predecessor of Wavescan, Radio Monitors International, also produced by AWR's Adrian Peterson, was broadcast on Radio Earth during a good part of its life cycle. In his commentary on the first broadcast of Radio Earth in June of 1983, Mike Polis said, Radio Earth is a worldwide radio service transmitting objective news, information, music, and feature reports to our audience, the world community, on the shortwave bands. Financed by the sale of commercial advertising, answering to no one government, organization, or sponsor, we are free of political and parochial bias, free to blend impartial information with innovative programming. Radio Earth seeks to be a medium of expression for mankind in the broadest sense, programming to humanity's highest common denominator, with broadcasts of universal interest, presenting those aspects of the human condition we all share, along with the varied facets of individuals and societies, so we may better understand each other and see our differences as diversity and not as divisiveness. Despite our national and cultural dissimilarities, as a species, as life, we're more alike than we are different. As they say, people are the same everywhere. And thus the charter, the goal of Radio Earth, to give the human species a chance to be heard above the din of nations which occupy these worldwide frequencies. We give the earth a chance to speak for itself.
Presenting the world to the world on Radio Earth, a new sound in international shortwave commercial broadcasting.
In Mexico City, Julian Santiago tells us that the privately owned station, Radio Mil, has reactivated its shortwave frequency of 6010 kHz with the call letters XEOI, airing the programming of its medium wave station, Radio Mil, XEOY, on 1000 kHz AM. Here's what they sound like.
Turista en tu ciudad. Guía DF. Somos Radio Mil. Vive México. XEOY AM. 7º aniversario. Generamos todo nuestro contenido desde Santa Fe. Vive México. Prolongación Paseo de la Reforma 115. Paseo de las Lomas. www.radiomil.com.mx. Interacción permanente en Twitter. @Radio Mil Viajes. Y Facebook. Radio Mil Viajes. 7 años de Radio Mil. Vive México.
Tú eres México, yo soy México.
Concepto especializado en turismo de NRM Comunicaciones. 7 años viajando contigo. 7.
México en
Radio Mil from Mexico City on 6010 kHz, back on the air. We had a chance to visit the station's headquarters in Mexico City several years ago. They have their own building with real state-of-the-art facilities in a very nice part of Mexico City. And incidentally, their programming now specializes in tourism and gastronomy, with lots of tourist information about Mexico City and all parts of the Mexican nation. So it should make for some very interesting listening if you can pick them up on shortwave. Very nearby Radio Mil's frequency is Radio Patria Nueva from La Paz, Bolivia, which Arnaldo Slain in Argentina reports in Noticias DX is now reactivated on 6025 kilohertz, heard in Buenos Aires at 1020 to 1040 UTC. Radio Patria Nueva is operated by the Bolivian government, and it airs features like this one called Marvelous Bolivia.
Es tiempo de Bolivia maravillosa.
El sagrado lago Titicaca es considerado como el más alto del mundo, pues se ubica a 3.812 metros sobre el nivel del mar, con una profundidad de 304 metros. En la región predomina el clima frío y seco.
Radio Patria Nueva from La Paz, Bolivia, back on 6025 kilohertz shortwave.
You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. Send your comments and reception reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229 in the United States. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229 in the USA. Or you can email us at wavescan@awr.org. Our email once again, wavescan@awr.org.
Now some sad news to pass along. This comes to us from Ralph Perry via David Zanto in Janesville, Wisconsin, USA. Ralph says, with the heaviest of hearts, I must advise you that our friend and brother DXer Don Jensen passed away on the afternoon of May 23rd. According to his wife Arlene, Don was working on his computer, no doubt sending emails and working on reception reports at the time. Don was a giant of our DXing hobby and can never be replaced. We will all greatly miss him, his wit, opinions, and general brilliance. The North American Shortwave Association, NASWA, reminds us that Don Jensen began DXing in 1947, when at the age of 11, he was introduced to the shortwave listening hobby by his father, a ham operator. He's been associated with NASWA in editorial, administrative, and committee activities for some 38 years, longer than any other active member. In 1964, he founded and was the first executive secretary of the Association of North American Radio Clubs, or ANARC. From 1969 to 1989, he published and edited the Numero Uno weekly DX newsletter. He was formerly the editor of Communications World magazine and had been a freelance writer since 1963, his DXing columns last appearing in the former Popular Electronics in 1999. He also has had regular features aired on various DX programs around the world. Don Jensen was a retired newspaperman and lived in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Bob Zanotti, formerly of Swiss Radio International and now producer of SwitzerlandInSound.com, sent us the following recording of an interview he did with Don Jensen at the 1979 ANARC convention in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Don, ANARC is 15 years old. This is the 14th ANARC convention. And you have been able to see them from the beginning up to the present time, being the founding father. How have they evolved over the years, looking at the very beginnings, the very first convention, and looking at these 200 people assembled here today in Minneapolis?
Well, the first convention was held in 1965 in Kansas City, Missouri. We had 12 people attending the convention. ANAC was a fledgling organization then. It's fantastic to see the number of people who have come here to Minneapolis to attend this year's fantastic convention.
What do you think has meant the increase in attendance over the years? Where has this come from?
Well, of course, there's been a great increase, I think, in the number of people who are interested in shortwave. listening, and in the other forms of the listening hobby as well. And I think it's reflected here in the number of people. The growth of ANERC, the publicity it has received, the good it has done, all of these things I think have made the convention a success.
Now, the Europeans are not particularly happy, especially looking at the last couple of EDXC conferences, about the presence of broadcasters. They can sometimes outnumber the DXers who were there. How do you feel about the presence of broadcasters?
Well, certainly the presence of broadcasters has, I think, made this convention and the convention last year in Montreal the great successes that they were. I think that the broadcasters have a real role to play in conventions such as this. I as observers, as persons who are here to share ideas with us, I think decisions that affect the hobby organizations like ANERC should be made by listeners, but I think we should welcome the broadcasters, and the more there are that attend these conventions, the better it is as far as I'm concerned.
Any real danger that these conventions could get too big?
I think we have a long way to go before we have to worry about that kind of thing. I'm just delighted to see this many people here.
And any long-term ideas for changes, modifications in the concept of the convention itself, or let a good thing lie?
Well, as I said, I think one of the big pluses in the last several years has been the increased attendance by the broadcasters. I think broadcasters learn a lot from these conventions, and I certainly think that the listeners learn a lot from them in return. And I would like to see more of that kind of participation. I would like to see, instead of 9 representatives of broadcasting stations as we had here this year, I'd like to see 20 or 30 in the years to come.
Well, it may happen that way, and let's hope we'll all get together again in another 15 years and see what the size of attendance is then.
I certainly hope so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don.
That was Don Jensen speaking with Bob Zanotti of Swiss Radio International in 1979. Don died on May 23rd. I had the opportunity to meet him a few times at NR conventions back in the 1970s, and he was certainly one of the great proponents of the DXing hobby in the United States and around the world. Incidentally, Anker Peterson of the Danish Shortwave Club International reports that Don Jensen's grandparents were Danish and emigrated to the United States. Don had been a member of the DSWCI since May 1962. Over in Africa, Adventist World Radio is operating a total of 14 FM radio stations in 10 different countries, each of which is on the air 24 hours daily. For those of our listeners living in Burundi, you can tune in the FM station in Bujumbura on 101.8 megahertz with all programming in the Rundi language. The AWR station in Yaoundé in the Cameroons is at 92.4 FM with programming in 4 languages: Beti, English, French, and Fulfulde.
Hello everyone, to our dear shortwave listeners. Good evening, good morning, wherever you're welcome to the June edition of the Philippine VX Justice Report number 76. I'm Henry Umaday Nantique, Central Philippines. Glad to be back and thank you for listening. Reception logs for May 2013. May 1, Radio Thailand on 9390 in English from Odantani at 12:47 UTC as our rating 333. May 1, KBS World Radio 9570 in English from Kimchi at 1300 UTC as our rating 333. May 1, HHAB Australia on 15340 in English from Kononura at 1520 UTC as a rating 444. May 8, Radio Japan on 11705 in English from Yamata at 1400 SI rating 444. May 10, China Radio International on 11705 in Filipino from Beijing at 1430 UTC SIO 444. May 12, All India Radio on 9690 in English from Bangalore at 1500 UTC SIO rating 443. May 12, Radio Pilipinas, The Voice of the Philippines on 15285 in English from Tinang at 0250 15 UTC ESO rating 323. May 12, Voice of Turkey on 7205 from Emerler in English at 2010. SIO rating 444. May 22, Radio Australia on 11695 in English from Shepparton at 2033. SIO rating 555. May 22, Voice of Turkey on 7205 in English from Emerler at 2035 UTC. SIO rating 333. May 22, Radio Romania International 13800 in English from Bucharest at 2033. SIO rating 443. May 22, All Angel Radio on 11740 in English at 2048 UTC. SIO rating 555. And May 22, Radio New Zealand International on 11725 in English from Rajataki at 2050 UTC. SIO rating 555. We have a special QSL card just for you. For your reception report, please send 1 IRC International Reply Coupon or 2 US dollar. Retained postage will be greatly appreciated. And friends, if you want to get the transcript of today's Pilipinas DX News and see our QSL card series, please visit http://filipinasdx.wordpress.com. That's http://filipinasdx.wordpress.com. Follow us also on Facebook, www.facebook.com/filipinasdx. Or you may want to send us your comments, suggestions, reception likes, and informations to filipinasdx@yahoo.com. That's PILIPINASDX for filipinasdx@yahoo.com. This has been Henry Umaray for Wavescan in Antiques, Central Philippines, saying mabuhay at maraming salamat po.
Radio Hobbyist welcome you in the June edition of Bangladesh DX Report in Wavescan. This is Alauddin Dollar from the beautiful city Rajshahi, Bangladesh. Glad to be back and thanks for listening. We also want to thank Mr. George Jacob and Ithiras Purokayastho from India, Mr. Christopher Redzer from Austria, Mr. A.K.M. Nuruzzaman and Mr. Wahid Lashkar from Bangladesh, and all of our listeners who have sent their valuable comments and reception report of Bangladesh DX Report in Wavescan. Let's start. Bangladesh Betar. To continue random transmission on FM 105 MHz, Bangladesh Betar stopped their transmission on 104 MHz. They switched the transmission of 104 MHz to 88.8 MHz, whose power is 10 kW. Due to power supply problem, listeners of 105 MHz could not listen program. 105 MHz of Bangladesh Betar Rajshahi is very important because it relays the Bengali program of BBC and NSK Radio Japan. PCJ Radio. PCJ Radio started its transmission for South Asia, Southeast Asia and East Asian countries via Trincomalee, Sri Lanka on every Sunday on 11835 kHz at 1300 to 1400 UTC. PCJ Radio also aired program on 9th June for Europe at 1300 UTC on 5955 kHz and on 10th June for America at 0000 UTC on 9925 kHz via Noan, Germany transmitter site. A special QSL is being issued by PCJ Radio for this transmission. Please send your reception report to pcjqsl@pcjmedia.com. Now, the receiving log of different radio stations which I monitored. 2nd June, 0132, 0140 UTC, Voice of America in Burmese on 15115 kHz, the SIO code was 333. 1320 to 1400 UTC, PCJ Radio on 11835 kHz. The SIO code was 444. June 3rd, 1130 to 1200 UTC, Adventist World Radio in Shan language for Myanmar on 15605 kHz. The SIO code was 444. 9th June, 1300 to 1330 UTC, PCJ Radio via Trincomalee on 11835 kHz. The SIO code was 433. 1330 to 1345 UTC, Radio Japan in Bangla on 11685 kHz. The SIO code was 444. 1400 to 1500 UTC, BBC Bangla extended transmission on 11730 kHz. The SIO code was 555. 1600 to 1615, Adventist World Radio DX program Wavescan special edition on tribute to Ekala on 15360 MHz. The SIO code was 333. 1615 to 1630 UTC, Voice of America in English for Africa on 15580 kHz. The SIO code was 322. 1630 to 1645 UTC, Voice of America in Pashto on 9335 kHz. The SIO code was 433. Bangladesh DX team will issue EQFL card for the correct reception report of this program. Please send your reception report to dxbangla@gmail.com. dxbangla dxbangla@gmail.com. Okay, I will come with more DX news in the next edition. Till then, take care. Salahuddin Dolar, Rajshahi, Bangladesh.
And with the Schneewalzer, or Snow Waltz, from Germany, we end today's edition of Wavescan from Adventist World Radio, the International DX program researched and written in Indianapolis by Dr. Adrian Peterson. Next week, more from the NASB annual meeting, Bulgarian Radio Through the Years, Part 6, and our Australian DX report. We have 2 QSL cards available for your reception reports on this program, one issued by AWR, another by WRMI. Our address for your reports is Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. You can email us at wavescan@awr.org. That's wavescan@awr.org. I'm Jeff White at WRMI in Miami. Till next week, good listening.